Hi, my name is Jonathan. Thank you for joining this next session. We're going to talk about deploying these edge devices. All right. So basically, we're going to just talk about how we deploy the C edge and V edge devices. The C edge is the SD WAN software running on a Cisco device, and the V edge is the SD WAN software running on a native piece of Viptela hardware. And we're going to talk about the challenges we're going to run into in NAT environments and the different types of NAT and how we traverse them. Okay. And the deployment of these is relatively straightforward, but there are some challenges that we need to be aware of, and as long as we're aware of them and we take them into consideration, they won't break anything. Okay? So when you buy these edge devices, this is going to provide you a list of these serial numbers and parameters for those devices in a .viptela file. Okay? And the first step is going to be, in the edge bring up, is to upload that file into vManage as follows. Under configuration devices, we're going to choose upload WAN edge list, okay? And we're going to point to the tool to the correct file, and then it's going to upload and we're going to validate that file. Okay, so we're going to select the file here, and then we check the box there and then hit upload. Once we hit upload, the device list is going to get uploaded, and we're going to see a state change here to show that it's validated. Okay? And we'll actually see each one of these devices being added as a separate task. Remember up here we had that task list I talked about earlier? You can actually exit out of this, so you don't need to sit there and wait for this to occur. You can go back and do other things and then click back here and check on the status. And when, of course, what we want to see is that green success that we talked about, and then if anything goes wrong, we'll actually see it here. Biggest reason we'll see a failure of some sort is if there's some kind of typo in the file. Once that's uploaded, that list is going to get pushed out to all controllers, and you can actually see that task happening. Once that happens, a flag is going to indicate its validity. So this state here is what I was just talking about. And that means we basically, the V-Edge device can connect without any further intervention from the vManage side, because we previously checked that box to validate the V-Edge list. If devices were invalid, not shown here, we don't have any devices, these are all actually showing as valid, you could validate them by clicking the link and it would take you through the validation process. Okay? So how do we deploy these? We also have a way of deploying the V-Edge devices is going to be very similar to that of the controllers. You're going to have an OVF template you can deploy, and you can create these as VMs. These are actually cloud edge devices. And you can so let's say you have a data center that has a lot of connectivity, you can bring those into VMware so you don't need to actually deploy a piece of hardware. And this is very similar to the other devices. We deploy an OVF template, we perform initial configuration. If we're using a local CA, we install that root, and then we activate it. This is for vEdge Cloud here. And here are the size requirements depending on your performance, okay? The faster throughput you need, the more virtual CPUs and you'll need as well, okay? And we're going to need a minimum of 3 vNICs for these. These are supported on VMware, AWS, Azure, etc. So, as previously done with the controllers, this virtual machine must be wired up as well virtually with the correct VLANs. On the left side of this list, we're going to have the networks that we need. So, which are our available vNICs. Next to the list of source networks is the list of destination networks. All right? And as spoken before, we're going to need to link these to our management VLAN and our tunnel VLAN, our control and overlay VLAN. Okay? And then we'll have additional interfaces that we can join as well. Okay? And you can see the default settings here and interface names for each of the links and whether or not DHCP is enabled. DHCP is going to be enabled by default for VNIC 0 and VNIC 512. That's right, VPN 0 and 512. Okay? And then on the device, what we do is we'll console into it, because we won't be able to SSH anything yet because we don't have any IP address. So we're going to create our management VPN, VPN 512. We're going to assign an interface to it, the same one that we did previously in the VMware page, and then assign an IP address to it. Okay? Then we're going to config system and do the system parameters. Give it a host name, a system ID, a site ID, which is critical for determining, especially if you have multiple edge devices in the same site, they must have the same site ID. Then the organization name. Remember, the organization name is 100% has to be configured 100% accurately. If there's an extra space or anything else, the site will not come up. Okay? And then the IP address of vBond. And then we do a commit and quit to save. What I would do is I would template this, and when you're configuring these manually, make sure you copy and paste them in so that there's no error. And then here's us creating VPN 0 with our tunnel interface saying create tunnels using this interface. And this is the guy that tells us that we're using this as a tunnel interface and the fact that it's VPN 0. Okay? And then inside VPN 0, we need to just create a default route. Remember, just like Cisco routers, when you first bring them up, interfaces are shut down, so you will need to no-shut these. And then, as stated before, after you're finished configuring, do commit and quit. If you try to exit without committing and committing, it will give you a message saying, hey, there's unsaved changes, you want to discard them. So that you will be warned before abandoning those changes. Okay? And again, same thing as before. If we've got a local certificate authority, we'll go into vShell and upload the cert chain. That's supposed to be a rectangle? Don't ask. All right. So when you deploy the OVF templates for a vEdge, the initially deployed device has no particular identity, right? Because if I boot it, I'm installing it using the same OVA, right? OVF file. Every one of them looks identical. So remember, if it's a piece of hardware, it's got a built-in hardware certificate. If it's a piece of software, of course, it doesn't. Therefore, we're going to have to give it some kind of identity explicitly. To do that, we'll generate a bootstrap configuration for each of those vEdge cloud devices. It contains an identity for the vEdge. Then we copy the bootstrap configuration to the device manually. After we generate this, we'll get a universally unique identifier, a UUID, and a one-time password, aka a token of some sort, which we'll give to the device. Okay? And that's pretty straightforward. When you're inside the configuration, so it would be configuration devices, you've created the device before here, so you're going to click the 3 dots on that line to generate the bootstrap configuration. I know it's a kind of a fun chain of links to get to there, but once we have that information, we can get it to the device. Okay? And before we assign that identity, we'll note the device's current status with that show control local properties command. We can determine whether a certificate is installed. And of course, you can see here that it is not, and still not. The certificate's not installed. The certificate serial number is, well, obviously not available yet. Now we'll need to give that device its identity by activating it. So on the device itself, we'll do a request, vEdge Cloud Activate Chassis, and then we'll specify the UUID and that one-time password we got on the previous page. Okay? And then after a few minutes, we can view this vEdge list on the vManage to see if that device enrolled successfully. And what we'll want to see here is that A, it's in sync, and it's valid, and then we should be good to go. Okay? Once we see something in sync, that means the vManage can access and further manage the device. If it's not in sync, if you see an out of sync there, that usually indicates that the device was attempted to be configured, it is in the middle of a rollback, or the device and vManage are not talking to each other correctly. It usually means the device may have lost access to vBond and can't find its servers. Okay? Generally, if you wait a few minutes, the vEdges will actually cycle themselves and reboot back to their last known good configuration so that they can get connectivity back to vManage. If all of that fails, you can factory reset the vEdge and it'll come up and try to get a new configuration from vManage. So, because it is possible to configure these devices to lose their connection, and because we don't generally have direct access to them, if they lose their access to vManage after a commit, they will just fall back to their last configuration. Okay? And then again, now we're going to run that same command we ran earlier to verify certificate status, and we see that installed, and there's our certificate serial number. Okay? And here's the big command I really, really like. If you're having issues with the vEdge connecting to the cloud, do a show control connections, and what you'll actually see is your connection to vSmart, vBond, and vManage right here, and the IP address and what protocol we're using over it. I know that's a lot of squiggles, but the point here is that we've got a control connection up. If you actually look further right, you'll get the IP addresses that we're actually connected to and which tunnel we're actually using. And once you see this, once we've got all of our control connections up, now the device is fully manageable, and we can actually configure it completely from vManage. If you do a show control connections and you just have dashes across here, that means that the device itself doesn't have any control connections and something's incorrect. Usually what it means is that the device doesn't have internet access if you're using some cloud-based system, or if it just doesn't have a route to vBond, or the vBond command wasn't placed correctly on the device at all. So before deploying these, we're going to have to import this WAN edge list. You're going to get this from Cisco when you purchase these devices. So when you get a palette of devices, you're going to get a vEdge list that you're actually going to upload to vManage, which is going to have a list of all those serial numbers. All right? And there's different ways to set up cEdge, vEdge, and the vEdge cloud devices manually. All right? Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for our next episode.